Our next guest is the co-author of a new Politico piece detailing President Donald Trump's plan to reinstate the, quote, most favorite nation policy for Medicare drug pricing. The new goal here aims to align U.S. drug prices with those of other economically advanced nations, potentially reducing costs for Medicare beneficiaries. White House reporter at Politico, Jake Traylor, joins us now. Jake, appreciate your time. So what is the Trump campaign's or the Trump White House's plan here to revive this kind of sweeping Medicare policy reform? What's most important here for the average person watching to know?
Yeah, so it's interesting because for weeks now, Donald Trump and the White House have been teasing a really large announcement. And they've not even been so specific as to say what it relates to. But today was that ultimate announcement that Adam and I were reported on last week, which is that essentially Trump is asking drug makers to lower U.S. prices. What's significant about this executive order that Trump signed today is it really cites no real obvious legal authority to mandate these lower prices. There were a lot of different ways that Trump could have gone about this, offering certain regulation, policy, working with Congress to ensure that these drug prices are at least proposed to be lower. But there's really no mechanism that was included in the executive order today to actually see drug prices lower. Instead, a lot of recommendation, a lot of prompting for certain federal agencies to look into why drug prices are so high, and also some threats to leverage trade on European countries to help decrease the price of drugs in the United States. But there was no significant mechanism issued in this executive order to actually see drug prices lowered in the United States, which is very notable.
Jake, is this the follow-through of a campaign promise from the president? And if so, how different, if at all, does today's executive order look from the things we heard from then-candidate Donald Trump?
Yeah, that's right. This is something Donald Trump has talked about, not just in this candidacy for re-election in 2024. He attempted a version of this in his first administration. So this most favorable nation policy, reducing drug prices in the United States, is something that has been on Donald Trump and his White House's mind for literally almost a decade now. It's something he's attempted before. What's unique about this one, this go around though, is if you'll remember in the first Trump administration, Trump attempted something similarly to this. I was talking with someone at the White House who said this specific executive order is intentionally more ambiguous because the first one got shut down in the courts. There's an attempt here to not actually let this one be as aggressive so that it potentially can, in some ways, at least encourage the process to begin to allow these drug prices to reduce. But this is something that's been on Trump's mind for a long time. The problem again here is that there's not a direct authority at stake in the executive order to do what he's promised over the course of the years.
Jake, how different is this approach from policy initiatives we saw under the Biden White House?
Yeah, it's quite different. I will say, though, to note this one isn't directly policy specific. Biden, in a way, has attempted and addressed the rising prices of drugs and the significant, notable fact that the United States drug prices are, I think, 2/3 sometimes the times of other developed countries. But Trump has by far been more vocal on this than in the Biden administration. Now, I think particularly as we look forward, it's what does the United States and what does the White House, what does Trump's White House relationship and efforts look like in conjunction with Congress to actually see some type of effort to reduce drug prices.
Jake, do we have a sense yet on the response from the pharmaceutical giants or how they may publicly posture moving forward after this executive order?
Yeah, I think certainly there was some scared sentiment among some of these pharmaceutical companies with this tease of this big announcement. And then Trump called it the most sweeping, one of the largest, most important announcements he's ever made in regard to any industry, let alone in pharmaceuticals. What we saw was not a policy-specific executive order. So far, at least, we've seen a bit of an increase in some of the stocks of pharmaceuticals just this morning post-announcement. Because it ultimately was not as intense or demanding as they expected it to be. Again, Trump has threatened that potentially via some trade with the other European nations, he will enforce to ensure that there is a reduction in pricing. But as of right now, there was kind of a soft increase in some stocks we saw in pharmaceuticals this morning because it was less demanding than anticipated.
What role do tariffs play in all this, aside from general market volatility? But when you discuss things like imports from China, active pharmaceutical ingredients, it's a sort of secondary lane of the general tariff policy rhetoric out of the White House we hear. What do you see as being the intuitive connection to that story, which has dominated at least financial markets since April 2nd?
Yeah, honestly, it's a little messy because Donald Trump, and we've seen this over the past couple of weeks, we actually saw it this morning, he's been leveraging tariffs kind of as a catch-all. Like it is his ultimate bargaining chip. We saw him today talking about peace deal with Iran and telling them that he was ultimately using trade and tariffs as leverage. Donald Trump is claiming to do the same thing here with this policy, saying that it'll be tariffs and trade that he's going to use to ultimately have a mechanism of some type of authority to reduce drug prices in the United States and potentially increase them in European nations. The actual connection there, to me at least, is still pretty ambiguous because there's not a precedent for that. There's not a direct route of exactly how Trump leverages those tariffs to pressure some of those European nations. But it is something Donald Trump has threatened to use in his executive order announcement earlier this morning.
Jake, I'm really interested in the politics of this. Let's first start with the GOP side. Are there any or many Republicans who you think would not agree with this maneuver from President Trump?
There are certainly plenty of Republicans who have gone kind of quiet when it comes to actual legislation that would reduce drug prices. That's on the Republican side at least, and that's been the case for a while, which I think ultimately is why Trump has control of Congress. Republicans have control of Congress, and we've not seen a concerted effort between the House and the Senate and the White House to actually propose a certain policy that would address it. So there are Republicans who are opposed to it, and that actually Donald Trump is not afraid to go against kind of the generic Republican kind of movement, because he for a long time has been very, very vocal about wanting to reduce drug prices. I think here we're seeing it's interesting to me that there was no accordance, there was no involvement of any House or Senate conjunction here to try and actually propose legislation that would make a difference, because I think there are a lot of Republicans who are opposed to it.
How about Democrats? I'm specifically wondering some of your more progressive members of Congress who may sit there and say, in spirit, ironically, believe it or not, this is the type of thing we would actually support.
That's right. Yeah, I think it is one of those few kind of policy places where Donald Trump potentially could have some crossover leverage here to bridge across the aisle with certain Democrats. One thing, just from watching Donald Trump in the past few weeks with trade policy, specifically foreign tariffs, he is not one to extend the initial hand. He is not one to necessarily bring in some of these Democrats into these conversations. But it is very likely that maybe his best route through Congress is to loop in some of these Democrats that would actually be potentially interested in something of the sort.
All right, White House reporter at Politico, Jake Traylor, a really important conversation coming at a crucial time on a big day for that executive order. We'll see how stocks and the general market respond. Jake, thanks a lot for being here. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me.